NBC announced that Caitlin Clark will join their coverage for Sunday Night Basketball beginning this weekend for the Lakers versus the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. This is the WNBA superstar's debut as an NBA analyst, and NBC has absolutely been killing it. First they had MJ, which, by the way, that deal was insane. He got paid $40 million, and I literally think he sat down for an hour.
NBC just made a move that sent shockwaves through both the NBA and the WNBA, because this weekend at Madison Square Garden, during Lakers versus Knicks, Caitlin Clark will officially debut as an NBA analyst on Sunday Night Basketball, and this isn't a symbolic guest spot or a PR experiment. This is NBC placing a currently active WNBA superstar on the biggest basketball broadcast stage in America. And while most players across the league stayed silent or visibly uncomfortable about Caitlin landing one of the most prestigious media roles in basketball, one reaction instantly stood out. Not from an executive or analyst, but from her own teammate. Because Aaliyah Boston's two-word response quietly exposed the culture inside the Indiana Fever, the jealousy simmering across the WNBA, and why this partnership might actually be the healthiest star duo the league has seen in years. And the real question isn't whether Caitlin deserved this opportunity, it's why so many people in her own league still struggle to celebrate it, while one teammate showed exactly what real leadership looks like.
So what are your thoughts on your teammate joining you as a colleague at NBC?
Oh, I know, I'm super excited. I think that's awesome. I think Caitlin's going to do a great job. She's awesome at everything she does, and so this is going to be no different.
NBC didn't ease Caitlin into this role either. They officially announced her as a special contributor to Sunday Night Basketball starting immediately, beginning with Lakers versus Knicks at Madison Square Garden, one of the most iconic venues in sports. And this is NBC's flagship basketball broadcast, the same network that just paid Michael Jordan $40 million for what amounted to a single sit-down. So when they choose to put Caitlin Clark alongside NBA legends, it's because they believe she brings real insight, real audience pull, and real value. And the moment that news broke, the reaction across the WNBA told its own story. Because instead of widespread congratulations, most veterans said nothing at all. Some leaned into the same passive silence that's followed Caitlin's rise for 2 years. But then one reaction cut straight through the noise. Because Aaliyah Boston didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, and didn't soften her response. She saw the announcement and immediately posted one word, period, with an emoji, and somehow those 2 words said more than any carefully crafted statement ever could.
And it's just so crazy that it feels like every other sport will just come out and say what it is besides the WNBA. The NBA is not scared to acknowledge that there's no more iconic figure in basketball. Not just the women's game, but possibly the game in general than Caitlin Clark. But we would not hear that in the WNBA space. We wouldn't hear that from WNBA media. But the NBA media and the NBA and the league itself is not scared to say it. Like we've seen it when Caitlin does golf events. It just seems like every league but her own is not scared to say the truth.
That response mattered because context matters. And in the current WNBA climate, support for Caitlin Clark hasn't exactly come freely. Silence has been common. Passive-aggressive commentary has been louder than praise. And outright dismissal hasn't been rare. So when Aaliyah reacted with pure excitement and zero insecurity, it instantly stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was genuine. And what made it even more powerful was how fast it happened. She didn't wait to see how others would react. She didn't check the temperature of the room. She simply celebrated her teammate the moment the news dropped, which told everyone watching that this wasn't PR, this was real. And when fans noticed how few WNBA stars publicly acknowledged Caitlin landing an NBA broadcast role, Aaliyah's response suddenly felt even bigger, because it showed exactly where she stands, confident in her own career, and fully aware that Caitlin's success doesn't take anything away from her.
What was it like for you this past season in certain situations and circumstances to be the one offering advice and offering comfort versus the one receiving it? Because, you know, the previous year you were the rookie, right? How was that role different for you, and how comfortable were you taking that on?
I think, the only difference really is that I was doing it in the league. This time, I feel like I've always been someone that kind of gives advice and kind of gives my 2 cents especially when it comes to basketball, just because obviously the way I see the game. And so for me this year, especially having Caitlin being a rookie, like I obviously just being a rookie the year before and knowing exactly what's going to come, whether it's the refs, whether it's social media. But I think also Caitlin handles that like a champ. Like she knows exactly what it's going to be, but she also knows that she has a big name, and Caitlin Clark is a huge name that people want to come on. They want to say what they think. They want to what she should do, what this should happen. But I think when you look at it, Caitlin's just a competitor, right? And so for me, it made it easy because the advice I gave was just, okay, girl, I'll be my little short roll. If that's what you need, don't worry about the refs because they're not going to give you any calls because that's exactly what they do to rookies. And especially her being the player that she is, like they essentially want to see, oh, well, can you handle yourself on this league? But I think as the season went on, like you saw Caitlin, she handled that like a champ. And I think she handled it from the very first game. Is that her thing is she's here to compete. She's here to win. And it's as simple as that.
That same energy carried over when Aaliyah was asked about the NBC opportunity directly. Because her words matched her actions, she said she was super excited, that Caitlin was going to do a great job, and that she's awesome at everything she does. And that kind of response matters because spoken support, on record, is harder to fake than a social media post, especially in a league where players carefully choose every sentence. And Aaliyah didn't downplay how big this was, because this isn't just any broadcasting role. Caitlin landed the most prestigious media opportunity any women's basketball player has ever received, joining NBA coverage alongside Hall of Famers and elite analysts. And NBC didn't choose her for optics. They chose her because she understands the game at an elite level, because she draws viewers, and because her basketball IQ translates naturally to analysis. And instead of questioning whether Caitlin deserved it, Aaliyah framed it the way real professionals do, as a teammate winning and a moment worth celebrating. The timing of that support makes it even more meaningful when you look at what the Indiana Fever went through in 2025, because that season was brutal. Caitlin only played 13 games before a right groin injury shut her down for the second half of the year. Sophie Cunningham and multiple other players suffered season-ending injuries. And suddenly the pressure didn't disappear, it shifted almost entirely onto Aaliyah Boston, and instead of cracking, she carried it, playing all 44 games, averaging 15 points on elite efficiency, over 8 rebounds, nearly 4 assists, anchoring the defense, and earning her third straight All-Star selection. And this is exactly the kind of situation where resentment usually grows, where a player could easily think, I'm the one grinding while my teammate is sidelined and still landing massive opportunities. But Aaliyah never moved that way. She didn't hint at frustration. She didn't distance herself. And she didn't quietly root against Caitlin's success. Instead, she celebrated it, which tells you everything about her mindset. This is where the contrast with the rest of the league becomes impossible to ignore, because while Aaliyah was openly celebrating her teammate, much of the WNBA responded to Caitlin's NBC deal with silence or subtle resentment, with some veterans continuing to suggest that certain players receive opportunities they didn't earn, even though no one can explain how an active WNBA player joining NBA coverage hurts the league, and Aaliyah clearly understands something many don't. When one of your franchise stars becomes a visible presence on national NBA broadcasts, it raises the profile of the entire organization. It keeps the team in headlines during the offseason. It makes Indiana more attractive to free agents. And it signals that the Fever are building something serious. And that mindset separates players who build winning cultures from players who quietly sabotage them through jealousy. Aaliyah has also been open about how her role shifted this season from being the rookie learning the league to becoming the one offering advice and protection, especially with Caitlin stepping into the spotlight with unprecedented attention. And she talked about preparing Caitlin for the physicality, the officiating, the social media noise, and the reality that rookies don't get calls, especially rookies with massive names. And instead of competing with that attention, Aaliyah embraced her role as a stabilizer, passing along experience without ego, which only works when a player is secure in who they are, and that leadership explains why this partnership works, because both players understand their roles, respect each other's talent, and don't feel the need to shrink the other to feel bigger. The NBA isn't afraid to acknowledge reality either. NBA media openly treats Caitlin Clark as a generational basketball figure, not just in the women's game, but in the sport as a whole. And yet the WNBA space still struggles to say that out loud, which creates an awkward contrast where every other league seems comfortable telling the truth except Caitlin's own. And Aaliyah's support quietly pushes back against that hypocrisy, because she understands that Caitlin's success benefits everyone, not just financially, but culturally. That mindset becomes even more important when you look at the Fever's future, because only a few players are under contract for 2026, and the franchise is clearly being built around Caitlin and Aaliyah. And chemistry between your two stars isn't optional, it defines everything. If that relationship turns toxic, the franchise struggles. But if it's built on mutual respect, you have the foundation for something special. And so far, every sign points to this partnership being exactly that. Fans noticed it too. Social media overwhelmingly praised Aaliyah for being a real teammate and a real leader, especially in contrast to the silence from veterans who should be celebrating a WNBA player landing such a prestigious role. And what made it resonate even more was how spontaneous it felt. She didn't wait, she didn't calculate, she just celebrated, and fans recognize authenticity instantly, especially in a league where so much feels political. Caitlin's response to the opportunity matched that same professionalism, thanking the legends she'll be working alongside, acknowledging the chance to learn, and staying focused on the game, not the drama. And that alignment between the Fever's two stars matters, because the 2025 season tested them in every possible way. Injuries, pressure, expectations, and uncertainty. And instead of creating division, it reinforced support. Aaliyah's two-word response might seem small, but in context, it was a statement. It said, "I'm secure enough to celebrate my teammate." It said, "Her success doesn't threaten me." And it said, "This is what professionalism looks like." And that message lands whether people want to admit it or not. The Indiana Fever got lucky when they drafted Aaliyah first overall in 2023 and Caitlin first overall in 2024, not just because of talent, but because both have the character to build something healthy together. Two stars who genuinely support each other are exponentially more valuable than two stars who resent each other. And based on Aaliyah's reaction to Caitlin's NBC deal, the Fever aren't just building a roster, they're building a culture. And that's how championships start.